lot of people have hope in a lot of things. There's no hope like the hope that comes from the gospel. See, the hope that the world gives is kind of like, it's been cloudy. It's been overcast. And I kept thinking it was going to rain, and it still hasn't rained. And so the hope that the world gives is like clouds without rain. The hope that the world gives is like a carefully wrapped package. It would be a shame if somebody on your birthday or at Christmas time gave you a carefully wrapped package. You open it up, there's nothing in it. That's the hope that the world gives. And it's kind of like balloons. You ever see kids and they just go crazy over some balloons, man. See a balloon and they just start jumping up and down. I want one, I want one. Bring it home. Couple days later, the thing is off in the corner, all deflated. But that's the hope that the world gives. It may bring you joy for a season, but it always gets deflated. But the hope that the gospel gives is hope that can never be deflated. You cannot deflate gospel hope. You can deflate hope in the economy. You can deflate hope in other people, but you can't deflate the hope of the gospel. And so he's saying, don't be moved from this hope. Stand strong in this hope. And that word, when he says be established and firm, it's similar to not being able to be budged from a seat. I went over to Pennsylvania, and Yvette's got some cousins, and they like to run around. They're pretty hyperactive. They run around, they play, they get into all kind of stuff. But you put SpongeBob SquarePants in the video, or you turn it on the TV, and they will not budge. I mean, there could probably be an earthquake or a tornado, and they'll just sit there. He's saying, don't be moved from this hope. Just like they would. Distractions all around. There's all kind of things that can move you from this hope. He says this hope in the gospel that you heard. And he's appealing to their senses. He's saying, remember when you heard it. Back then, they could have heard it in the marketplace. They could have heard it as they went to the synagogue. They could have heard it as they were on their way to a friend's house. And I want you to start thinking about when you heard the gospel. Remember when you heard the gospel and how it sounded like good news. Don't be moved away from this good news. There's no greater news than this, that you could be reconciled back to God. For those of you who are not followers of Christ, there's no greater news than to be reconciled back to God. I don't care if you win the lottery. If you win the lottery, you get some money, but you get all these cousins that you never found knocking on your door. That's not necessarily good news. A lot of times we make the gospel less than. We make the gospel something that's petty or trivial. We've heard the story before. And then we start trying to find good news in relationships. We start trying to find good news in our health. We start trying to find good news in other people, in our success in our careers. We start trying to find good news in our bank account. And I'm here to tell you today, if you can't find good news in any of those things, you could always find good news in Jesus. The gospel that you heard. Reconciled by the gospel. He says, that was proclaimed to every creature under heaven. Now that sounds like an exaggeration. Has everybody heard the gospel? Every creature, the ants, caterpillars. And what he's saying is, God has spoken a fresh word to creation. Well, we thought, hey, this thing, people, they think, man, life, it just sucks. You're born, you suffer, and you die. Oh, I forgot, pay taxes. It's a higher grade of suffering, so we got to include it in. He's saying all of creation is expecting and waiting, and they finally receive this good news. And I'm going to wrap it up, but then he says that not only has creation heard this good news, then he says, of which I, Paul, have become a servant. You heard it. All of creation heard it. And I heard it. And it was such good news that I, Paul, now you know me, you know what I once was. It's changed me. I was a persecutor, and now I'm a preacher because I've been reconciled by the gospel. I was a murderer, but now I'm a messenger because I've been reconciled by the gospel. I was Antichrist, but now I'm an apostle because I've been reconciled by the gospel. I used to worry all the time, and I used to be stressed, but now I'm reconciled by the gospel. I used to care about what everybody thought of me, but now I'm reconciled by the gospel. I'm reconciled by the gospel, and I'm brought back in relationship to God, and my life is changed. That's the message that we preach. And we want to be gospel-centered. We want our lives to be oriented around this one message, as simple as for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him would not perish but have everlasting life. It sounds simple, and yet it's so deep that I could explore this for days and months and years. And it's something that when I'm sick in my body, and I have to go through, it's one thing to go through acute pain when you just, you get a stomach ache and then it's gone. But if you have to go through pain day in and day out, you wake up, I'm taking these penicillin pills and I'm just having a bad reaction. And every day I'm waking up and my stomach's hurting. And I'm thinking, man, what about people that have cancer? What about people that are sick in the hospital bed? Let me tell you something. This is something that can give you joy in the midst of that. When you go to work and you know that there are situations that you cannot solve, there's conflicts that cannot be resolved, and you have to go into a hostile workplace every day. It's the gospel that can inspire you. It's the gospel that can fuel you. It's the gospel that can bring you peace, because God has brought you back in relationship with him. And it doesn't matter if people don't like you. It doesn't matter if all hell is breaking loose everywhere you turn. It doesn't matter, because you're reconciled by the gospel. There's a preacher. He said, we're all seashells. You guys ever picked up a seashell? You pick it up and you put it to your ear. You can always hear the ocean. And it just always happens. No matter where you take that seashell, you always hear the ocean. No matter what you do to it, you shake it up, get out of there. It's still there. The sound of the ocean. The only way you can take that sound away is if you throw it back into the ocean. And that's us, crying out for God, alienated, enemies in our minds, upset with people, feeling stressed out, worried, wondering, how will I get a job? This economy's messed up. Wondering, will I get married? Just shaking the shell. You can get married, you can get another job, but you'll always have that sound unless you get thrown back in the ocean of God's love. That's what it means to be reconciled by the gospel. Let's pray.